What's going on, boxing fans? Julian Williams here with the distance prediction video. Kermit Cintron versus Paul Williams. Matchup takes place May 8th. HBO Boxing. Pretty much on that replay telecast of the Mayweather Mosley fight. I believe it's going to be replayed. Then we're going to have Cintron versus Williams afterward. 154-pound contest. Really no championship at stake. Pretty much it's just it's just a fight. Maybe it'll set up a rematch between one of these fighters and what's his name, Sergio Martinez, because both of them last year faced Sergio Martinez. One pretty much lost, and the other on my card drew. But you can debate whether or not Martinez won or Williams won. But it was a really close fight. Could have gone either way. But the Cintron fight definitely could not have gone either way. I thought Martinez simply won that fight. But anyway, what you get here in this matchup, you have two men in 2007 who pretty much held welterweight championships simultaneously. They are actually, from what I've read, they were supposed to face each other like in 2007, November 2007, but Cintron hurt his hand or something along those lines, and the matchup never came to fruition. So anyway, good matchup, because what you have in this matchup, you have tall, lanky fighter, really good reach, very good work rate, and knows how to apply decent pressure against a fighter who proved in his matchup the last HBO telecast that he was on, pretty much proved that he could fight a different style, because a lot of people get this impression that Cintron, since he's had some very good knockouts, is a really big puncher, but he showed in his fight against Angulo that he can box as well as he can punch. So anyway, in this matchup, the keys to victory for Kermit Cintron. Kermit Cintron, really needs to do the same thing he did in the Angulo fight, because Paul Williams is going to consistently come forward. He's going to consistently throw. He throws more than 100 punches per round. So Kermit Cintron needs a lot of movement. He doesn't want Paul Williams set. He needs to do the same thing that he did in the Angulo fight. He needs to pretty much box, use the perimeters to his advantage, and at the same time, when he uses those perimeters, he needs to cut off those angles, counter from the angles as well. Because Paul Williams, we saw in the matchup against Martinez, he had trouble defending himself against that right hand, and pretty much Cintron needs to pretty much move around those corners in the ring, around those posts, because Paul Williams, I've seen in fights, has had trouble cutting off the angles. He comes forward, and he comes forward in that straight line. Pretty much he can box from angles, but he can't come forward, and he can't really cut off the ring from angles. He kind of uses he pretty much uses his reach and his punching to his advantage. So Kermit Cintron in this fight has to really focus on boxing and pretty much trying his best to counter and get inside that Paul Williams jab, which is like an 81-inch reach. So he really needs to focus on avoiding that, the Paul Williams jab, avoiding that reach, and be able to get inside that jab and take the jab away. Because if he fights Paul Williams on the inside, I think that Paul Williams will probably eat him up on the inside. So I think that staying on the outside, and really I think a lot in and out movement, and countering when he comes on the inside can get Kermit Cintron to fight. Because Kermit Cintron in this fight can't stand and fight Paul Williams, because I think Paul Williams will outwork him if he stood and traded with him. But I do think that Cintron will land the more solid shots and the more solid blows on the inside than Paul Williams would land. But I think Williams will land more blows. I think he would win exchanges. So Cintron doesn't want to get in exchanges. He wants to be on the outside. He wants to, he wants to box. He wants to move. He wants to, pretty much use those corners, box, get out of the corners, and pretty much try not necessarily make it a rope fight, but make it a fight where he moves a lot. Similar to what Martinez did when he moved through the right hook and hooked off the jab. He needs to really try his best to do that. I think that's his best bet of winning this fight. If Kermit Cintron can box for a full 12 rounds and kind of keep it up, because in the Angulo fight he wasn't able to keep up that steady pacing. Towards the end, it kind of, the ring got smaller and it wore off a little bit, and he wasn't boxing the same way he did the first six, 7 rounds against Angulo. But really, he really needs to do that. He needs to really box patiently, and needs to box very smart, and needs to keep his composure in this fight. Paul Williams, in this fight, Paul Williams doesn't necessarily fight big. I mentioned that he fights from angles, uses a lot of angles when he fights, can throw punches from very crazy angles, and has a very high intense work rate. Throws more than 100 punches per round. Paul Williams in this fight has to pressure Kermit Cintron, and the way to pressure Kermit Cintron, he has to use the jab. He has to use the jab to pretty much set up everything. And Paul Williams isn't necessarily, a big knockout puncher, not necessarily a knockout puncher, but pretty much what he does, he smothers you half to death with, all of his shots, round after round. And in this fight, I really see him trying to do the same against Cintron. Though Cintron has very good boxing ability, I think that Paul Williams should pretty much come forward, and he needs to fight big. And as well, he does have this thing where he crouches down, and I really think that he doesn't need to crouch down in this fight. I think he needs to fight real big, because Paul Williams is a big fighter who fights somewhat small. He kind of crouches down and he gets caught, and I think that Kermit Cintron will probably catch him with some good shots, with some good clean shots, if he crouches down. So he does need to fight big. And really, Kermit Cintron is a pretty big guy as well. He's about 5'11". Paul Williams is about, they say 6'1", he's about 6'3". I'd say 6'3", 6'4". He's within that range. But Paul Williams needs to fight this fight big. He needs to fight tall. He needs to consistently come forward. He needs to use the jab. He needs to work. He needs to mix up his shots, fight from the angles, throw his shots from certain angles, because Kermit Cintron squares, he squares up, and he squares up. But we did see him fight from angles in the Angulo fight, and we see him in the past, do a good job of kind of setting up his shots from from angles. We've seen that, and Paul Williams doesn't want to get set up in this fight. He doesn't want Kermit Cintron setting him up. Paul Williams wants to maintain a very high, intense work rate. He wants to throw jabs from different angles, and pretty much he just wants to outwork Kermit Cintron in this fight. I think he needs to focus on outworking him and trying his best, pretty much not giving Cintron a chance to get his shots up, because if Cintron can get his shots off, if he can set up Paul Williams, then people are going to be yelling timber in the audience, because Kermit Cintron has pretty good knockout power. So anyway, really, if I have to make a prediction for this fight, I think it could be a close fight, to be honest. I think that Cintron has very good boxing ability, and showed it in the Angulo fight, as I keep alluding to. Very good boxing ability. I think he could be a little more technical, but me, I'm going to go with Paul Williams by unanimous decision in this fight. I think that Paul Williams will maintain a very high work rate. I think that Paul Williams will come out, typically throw his 100 punches per round. But I think that Cintron has the boxing ability to make it a close fight. But I see Paul Williams trying his best to take Cintron out, in this fight, because Cintron does have dangerous punching power. But towards the later rounds, the later stages of the fight, Paul Williams, I think, will outwork him to get the unanimous decision, because Kermit Cintron does a very good job, usually in the beginning of the fight, but it kind of wears off against fighters who punch a lot against him. It tends to kind of wear off towards round 4 or 5. He doesn't really do as much work in those rounds than he does in the first 3. So I think that Paul Williams will take advantage of it and get the unanimous decision victory. But anyway, that was the distance. Thanks for watching. Peace.